if you're a Christian and you want to take a shot at somebody who wears a mask and you think better of yourself because you don't, or if you're on the other side of that and here you are 5 years later going, man, I'm on my 8th vaccine. And I can't believe that somebody else isn't getting the medicine that I'm taking. And I feel better about myself. I would argue both of those perspectives are the same sin, and that's pride. Because whenever you feel better about yourself because of somebody else's weakness or perceived weakness, you are being prideful.
Yeah. What's going on? What's going on, my brother?
Yes.
Back in the building. Hey, listen. All right. I know that there was a statement I made over the last couple weeks when my brother Ryan McDermott's here. I was like, man, Brent doesn't have to be here, but I didn't mean it. I just want to go on public record.
I would like to hereby tender my resignation from the Chasing Elephant podcast. Ryan McDermott, you are... I now humbly pass the baton to you.
Hey, listen.
I'm going on vacation.
Listen, no, man. He did a great job, though, man. It was cool
phenomenal.
it was great having a brother there as we walked through those YPS questions and stuff, man. And so, but it's good to have my brother back, with the swanky sweater on.
I did not realize I was going swanky today. I walked in the office and they were like, whoa.
Yes, I hadn't seen, in probably 10 years,
now
I've not seen.
Now I'm going to wear it on Sunday. These are church clothes now.
Yeah,
didn't know that.
Yeah, and we got like fashionable staff members, and so they walked in and there was this big wow,
I was working till 1 a.m, and so I just grabbed whatever looked most comfortable in my closet. I didn't even put contacts in, man. So
yes, I see, man. I see you got your specs on. Welcome.
Yeah,
it's there, brother.
My prescription still is not caught up to where how bad my eyes are.
Oh my goodness. Well, bro, it's good to see you, man.
To see you,
how's everything going? You've been rolling, bro. Like you
We have been rolling. We have been, not to be dramatic, but I had a friend of mine call me yesterday and go, you know what you've been through? You've been through kind of a Job season.
You have, yeah.
And are still going through it a little bit. So a lot of challenges with. There's been some health challenges in our family, and there's been some, challenges with adoption, kids that we've adopted, and so we've got a bunch of fun things that have been, a bunch of fires that have been burning on the front porch that we've been wrestling through. But the Lord is faithful, the Lord is good, and we'll rejoice when we're on the other side of it.
Yes, sir. Well, you listen, bro. We've had your back, been praying for you. Love you guys and everything.
Thank you.
And so this episode, Brent, for both of us really is...
It's a weird anniversary.
It's a weird anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
This is one, as we were talking about content, talking through content, and you look up at the calendar, it's like, oh my gosh. We've embarked upon the 5-year anniversary of a global pandemic that just rocked our culture, known as COVID-19. And so, man, in lieu of that, we were just thinking like, man, maybe we should kind of talk about, man, what is our country and our culture and our world actually?
Well, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So we are they were 5 years removed.
5 years removed.
From when COVID-19 became an official global pandemic.
Yep. And I remember, I know you do as well, but I remember the exact place that I was at when it happened. Yeah. I was doing an event in Albany, Georgia with our friends at Sherwood. And I came in on a Wednesday night because it was their D Now weekend. Yeah. We were on the tail end of the Lift tour. We had one final stop, which is Warner Robins. And so I was doing the Wednesday night for just a kind of a tee up the D Now. And then Friday and Saturday and Sunday was the actual D Now. So Wednesday night was awesome. We had a great time. Thursday I go and hang out with one of our board members. Love, Brother Mark, that was there. Yeah. We hung out and then on my drive from his home back to my hotel, I get a call from the youth pastor over at the church, and he was like, "Hey, man,
called it."
Yeah, he's like, "We're gonna have to send you home." So first thing I'm thinking, what did I say? What did I do? And so he talks. He just and and no one at this time, Brent, knew how to kind of articulate what was happening fully. He's like, hey man, there's just kind of like this virus going around. We had a little bit of an outbreak here, and so talking to our pastor leadership, we're going to have to shut down the event. But I'm sure in a couple of weeks we'll check your schedule and we'll get back together. So I was like, okay, cool. I was driving from Albany to Orlando, which is about a 5-hour drive. Called one of our host sites who was hosting the Lyft tour, and I just said, hey man, this is what happened. Anything in your area happening? Just thinking about Lyft tour. And he, at the time, this is me leaving, he said, oh no man, we're good, heard about it, no big deal.
Yeah.
Brent, from the time I drove from Albany to Orlando, I called him back, or he called me he called me back, and everything had changed.
Yeah.
And so for me, I remember at that moment, okay, this is different.
Yeah.
This is different.
Do you remember the first time it got weird though? I do.
Where
That's
was
what
it?
marks it for me.
Okay, what was that?
I was on a flight at probably the same week. I was flying into Orlando, and I don't know if I coughed or sneezed. And here's the thing. I've got 2.5 million miles in the air. I've been traveling for 25 years. I'm used to all kinds of stuff on planes. And so I just have resolved that I'm going to live half my life in a tin can, and people are going to pass their germs around. But I coughed or sneezed, did not have a mask on. About half the plane had a mask on at this point.
Really?
The guy next to me had a mask on.
Okay.
And just me coughing and sneezing, he turns and he just stares at me.
What?
And I just looked
like
at it.
you had the plague.
Yeah, like I had the plague. And I was like, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
I knew.
Yeah.
People were saying the word COVID-19, but nobody was using the word pandemic yet.
Right.
But then I landed. This is when it got really weird. I went to the bathroom, and I'm washing my hands before I leave the bathroom. And in my head, I wash my hands. I am kind of I'm not a clean freak, but it grosses me out if you don't wash your hands.
Right.
So I wash my hands a lot. So I literally wash my hands like I normally do, but apparently the guy next to me was seeing how long I'd wash my hands for.
Really?
And when I was done, he went, "Oh, that's the right amount of time. Good job," and walked off.
He said that to you?
Yeah. And I went, holy cow. Well, I'm not going to say what I thought,
right.
But I went, things just got weird.
That's wild.
I didn't have a mask on.
And people are counting the seconds if you wash your hands.
And then people are counting, and you sneeze and you get stared at.
Yeah.
And stared.
Yeah.
And then number two, somebody counted in a bathroom at an airport how long the seconds how long I washed my hands for.
That's wild.
I want to go. Next time I'm just going to be like, twinkle, twinkle, little star. I don't know what else to do. But I remember when it got weird.
Yeah.
And then 5 seconds later, everything was shut down.
Yeah. And I do remember our first meeting as a team via Zoom. And we were really in the midst of flipping and getting prepared for Youth Pastor Summit, actually. And
there wasn't going to be a Youth Pastor
There wasn't
Summit.
going to be a Youth Pastor Summit. And I will never forget the phrase that you made that just has stuck with me and our team. We even have it in our office that self-preservation will never change the world.
Yeah.
And we're in the midst of this pandemic. Things will never be the same, but we still have to keep moving forward. But we didn't know exactly what all that would entail.
Yeah.
And but man, so that happens. And I think what was probably the most chilling thing for me was watching the news and seeing the death toll numbers tick up so fast.
Well, and then in hindsight, let's be honest. I think we all have to look back on that time, and this is what we should do. Everybody should look back on that time and give everybody else a lot of grace.
Yeah.
Like the people who got so strict in masking, or so strict in social distancing, or took it a little too far, or I think we should look back and give people grace. Because the truth is, there was a moment when it started to go, it's not over, most people aren't meeting, but hotels wanted business.
Yeah.
And we had to sign an agreement that we would wear masks.
Yeah.
Well, if all I got to do is put a stupid piece of cloth over my face,
Yeah.
and we can do SLU 101 live and in person,
Yeah.
and everybody wears masks, I say do it.
Yeah,
Like at that point, it's not about the functionality of a mask. It's about how bad do we want to get together.
Yeah.
And some people would argue, yeah, you're caving to the system, you're caving to the man, that's anti-American. I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I just wanted to get in a room with students and teach them how to think, dream, and lead at the feet of Jesus. So, I remember even when we did that, and then I even, and being like, wear the mask. Like, right. But then we didn't know what was going on.
Right.
We were just saying if you had to wear a mask so we could get together, wear a mask.
Yep, exactly.
I took the shot so I could leave the country.
Right.
So I could go take students to SLU 401.
Yeah.
And Israel didn't care that much, but getting back in, the United States cared a lot.
It was a thing. Yeah,
and then there was a booster, and then after that, I was like, you've shot me and you've boosted me. I'm done. I'm not taking any more of your medicine. Cool. I'm good. And so, and I'm not saying that I'm not anti-medicine, I'm not anti-vaccine, but I'm just. There was this moment where everything didn't make sense.
Right.
And for that moment, I think we should all give each other a lot of grace.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there was this moment where our panic became our dogma.
Wow, that's good. That's a great point.
And when our panic becomes our dogma, we're going to live in a very irrational way. Mm-hmm. And so when we started to realize, like, okay, maybe we don't need to be masking every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Or when we don't. Okay, good. We rushed a vaccine. We don't maybe know everything. Maybe it's time to hit the pause button. Or you know what? Maybe you don't have to social distance as much anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like there is a moment as we move forward where we go, okay, the panic is over.
Yep.
But when panic becomes dogma,
that's good.
You'll have news stations that'll still run the clicker 2 years later of deaths. And you're like, hold on.
Yeah.
You could be doing this with a lot of different sicknesses in the world right now. Why are you just doing this one?
Yeah.
And then you go to commercial and it's all about medicines and vaccines and you're like, oh, that's why you were doing it.
Yeah.
So there is this sense of grace for the panic season. We didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
And you've seen the people who panic became their dogma. Like I saw somebody this week in their car with a mask on.
Yeah.
5 years later.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why are you wearing a mask in your car by yourself?
Right. Yeah.
Like, what is?
Yeah.
How are you? What are you protecting yourself from? Your engine?
Oh yeah.
Or is there something on your dashboard that might get you? Or you afraid you're gonna? I don't know.
You're gonna inhale something through the AC.
Inhale something through the AC that came from the outside. I don't know, but why? But to me, I look at that and I go, that's what happens when panic becomes dogma. Is when you live in a very irrational way.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's so easy because you listen to people now, they look back on the pandemic, Jeff, and I'll shut up after this. But you look back on the pandemic, people are like, yeah, I never wore a mask. I punched a hole in my mask because I'm an American. Or those who go, man, I saved lives because they see themselves as a hero because they wore a mask. The truth is, nobody knew what was going on.
Right.
Nobody knew.
Yeah.
I remember that season very well. Nobody knew.
Yeah.
We were all, it was all like trying to walk in the dark without bumping into a wall. We were just kind of feeling our way through.
Yeah. And every day was different.
And every day was different.
Every day, you wake up one morning, this is the remedy to how we get on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Then, you wake up the next day, you punch holes in that remedy, it was so much that was going on. And I think that.
Did you ever get tested in a drive-thru?
I did actually.
I did. Three times I got tested.
Actually, I think about over by the Orlando Convention Center.
Yeah, I got tested 3 times in a drive-thru because I was doing so many events.
Yep.
That you had to show proof of. Like just make sure we're good. We want to.
And it was like a 2-hour process.
Oh yeah.
Like
we just want to make sure you don't have it.
Yeah.
So you'd go through the drive-thru and then you'd stick the thing up your nose.
Yep.
Somebody'd have to watch you.
You're right. Yep.
I mean, we were at a place where we were sticking giant Q-tips up our nose in Walgreens drive-through.
Yes.
So that we could go preach somewhere.
Yeah, right. Or like I said, it was the Orange County Convention, and there was like this mad traffic
I remember
jam.
that was the big one.
To turn into it, and you go down, and then listen, you had to give all kinds of documentation. It was like, man, I am an American citizen. I promise, I am.
Yeah.
And so, but it was crazy, and so now we're 5 years.
Yeah,
we're 5 years removed.
Yeah, and
our world has changed.
And so what have we learned?
Yes, what do we learn? So let's talk about that. I think, from a large picture perspective, we know that there was this global shift where you saw now this rise of a digital workspace. I think that's probably remote work, when you think about that, was kind of the thing that we saw people really kind of jumped into from a big picture standpoint. But I think the struggle with that, because I like to talk about what we learned, but then also kind of some of the challenges in today's time. I think it was good for a season because you were trying to get the work done, but I do think, and that you lost something from that, cultivating culture during that time, really connectivity, their collaboration, creativity, especially depending upon like what we do. I mean, we have a bullpen in our office because we value collaboration and being creative together.
Yeah.
And so, but you saw, man, now everyone went to this digital workplace model where remote work became the new way of people kind of engage in workspaces and stuff. And so I think that's one of the things that we've seen, that it wasn't as popular there 5 years ago as it is right now. And I think we've seen some.
I think that's shifting even now. I think people did that out of necessity. Then they wanted it for the convenience. I think what happens is we have to work remote out of necessity.
Yep.
Then they wanted to work remote out of convenience.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. Yeah.
And now companies who have to actually, leaders who have to actually measure productivity are going, this ain't working.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, even here in the city we live in, the largest, obviously, corporation here is Disney. And one of the things that the CEO of Disney did when he came back into his new role, like he was the guy, stepped away, passed the mantle off to another guy, and then ended up coming back.
Yeah.
He went, this remote stuff is killing us.
Yes.
We all got to get back in the office. We've lost something here. And he made everybody come back to work.
Yeah. So I think that was one. I think another thing we saw was just kind of the cultural trends of everybody kind of doing this mass adoption of digital platforms, meaning that now the connection point of being online, social media, it was kind of like, everything now was through digital communication because of the hybrid remote work and everything. You saw this heightened. I mean, social media was big, but people did not leverage social media as far as a vehicle for communicating, getting content out. You got short videos that was, became a thing. You saw people really kind of doing e-commerce jobs, and everything was all about this digital platform. And now we saw everyone really kind of build even relationships. I think the challenge in that was now relationships are being formed through the digital platforms and stuff. And so I think that was one of the things that we saw that was different. People didn't engage as much through digital vehicles exclusively, or primarily, I should say it that way, more so than it was kind of secondary. Now it's kind of flipped where people feel like, man, I know Brent Crow because I follow him, I engage, or Brent Crow can talk to me through the digital platforms and stuff. Yeah,
I think that existed before the pandemic, but it certainly became very heightened during the pandemic, and it did become more of the platform by which we did business and produced things and got stuff done.
Yeah. But I think one of the biggest things, Brent, was the impact on adolescent development and interaction. I think, the way that students coming out of the pandemic, their anxiety, kind of the depression that we see, the loneliness, kind of those numbers as far as mental health challenges with students in particular, the impact of that. Whereas, because I think about during that time, we just had Cameron in the house, and Cameron is a loner, and he's a C on the DISC personality profile. He's very disciplined. So for him, he had a routine. It didn't matter whether he was in the class or he was out of class. I mean, it didn't really impact him that much. However, CJ, my middle son, who's super relational, needs that interaction with people. Isolation was counterproductive for him. And so we saw that there was the increased rates of anxiety, depression, and loneliness within adolescent development. And we saw also the gaps of social learning. And so coming out of it, a lot of these students who were in that form of isolation, kind of getting back into our current culture, that personal interaction, that one-on-one interaction, they struggle with that. It's a struggle. I'm struggling to build healthy relationships with you because of the fact I spent so much time on a screen, through digital platforms, or in isolation by myself.
Yeah, this is where I just remember my first statement. We got to give each other grace for the time of panic.
Yeah.
But there was a moment in my mind where it went too far. And the lockdowns went too far.
Yeah.
And the
learning
at home went too far. So I actually think that we did an incredible disservice. And when I say we, I mean our society, our government. We did an incredible disservice to children and to students by taking them out of school for so long. Yeah, man. I actually think that we went, hey, I mean, it's almost akin to going, hey, we're gonna cure you of smallpox, but we're gonna give you cancer.
Yeah.
And
I see that.
We're gonna go, hey, we're gonna make sure you don't get. We protect ourselves so that we can stomp out this pandemic. Though there was no real proof, at least in my mind, that was a big contributing factor to stomping out the pandemic. But then at the same time, we're gonna give you another condition. That'll last even longer. And it's not just social ills like mental health and like anxiety and depression and the like. It's testing. Like the students who went through that are still playing catch up when it comes to critical thinking skills, when it comes to the ability to collaborate on projects, when it comes to retention. And part of the reason that they're having so much trouble with retention is because they had more time to go down the rabbit hole of where the algorithms would take them on social. And the farther they go down those rabbit holes, the less, the more it weakens their ability to be attentive to a subject, to a research question, to an assignment. And so I think we hurt ourselves academically. Too. And so I do think that there was hey, I understand the panic. I understand we don't know what's going on. This is a fire burning out of control. But I wonder if we were like, hey, well, we're gonna eradicate smallpox, but we're gonna give you another kind of disease, or something. It just maybe that's not the best analogy, but we're gonna solve one problem by creating a bigger problem.
Well, and one of the things studies show is that there was to your point, there was just the decline of the traditional social gatherings that took place. Whether it's students just kind of hanging out on the weekend in the mall, it's just going to sports events, going to youth group time, and so there was such a decline in traditional social gatherings that, to your point, now you've kind of created other issues within that, because these students are now left in a place. It's almost like you're in solitary confinement in a sense, just by yourself. And so, so that was to your point. I think that was that might have lasted too long, and because it lasted as long as it did. And then you had, we think about one of the challenges we dealt with was the polarization of our culture and society, and instead of and this is my humble opinion, what I saw, instead of whether you're a blue state or a red state, and instead of everybody saying, hey, we're the United States of America, let's come together, figure out together how we're going to do this, states kind of dealt with it in silos. And so some stayed locked down longer than others,
right?
And those states, I believe, they're going to take a little bit longer, and this is, they're going to take a little bit longer kind of recovering on so many levels, whether you think about just societal, whether you think about economic, because people are leaving those states, going to other states, there's the implications are going to be massive for years to come.
Yeah.
And so, so there was that extended time where students were isolated. I think you've already hit on it, the educational impact that they had, because you had those blended learning models that were, you had online, some were, trying to do hybrids as we got a little bit further away from the heightened part of the pandemic where, you got the options where you can either go or you can stay online. And I think that really kind of impacted students and children in a great way. And so we saw like those types of things, Brent, that from my perspective, I don't know if you saw anything else that like things that you've learned, like we saw again. So you had the digital space, the digital workspace there. You saw everybody now building relationships through digital platforms and online communication. We saw the impact. We talked about the impact from education, and we talked about the impact of the isolation that it did from the adolescent development, and how now students are still playing catch up. And I think, but then also one of the things that we saw, Brent, was the impact to the church. How really a lot of churches now became, they really kind of were impacted, and the churches that were impacted, or the way we view the impact also depend upon what state you were in. Some states, the churches are really hurting because they were in a state that they were really locked down. And then there are some states where the churches aren't as bad because the states were a little bit more open.
Think it's as new. I think it's more nuanced than that. I think that there was even a dividing line between traditional black churches and for example, suburban white churches. Because black churches were so slow to come back. And there's a lot of historical cautious fear that's attached to that. But I look at some that I looked up to and still do, but they waited so long. It's almost like they had to. They didn't come back, and now these pastors are trying to do a church revitalization.
Exactly, it's like a restart, a replay.
And so it's it was more nuanced, I think, than state by state. I think it was kind of a subculture by subculture. And so there was this 100 different ways people were trying to get back on board to pre-pandemic kind of normalities. And so, it was a mess for sure. Yeah.
What are, for you, we think about just the church, because I would say, I wrote down some notes that, just holistically, what were some things that the pandemic, it exposed, and I think one of the things, obviously, you can't ignore the fragility of life, that exposed it, really calls for us as followers of Jesus to really lean into the foundations of the faith and understanding the sovereignty of God, really press into concepts and ideas on what does the Bible speak on suffering, and really understanding that. And so I think that was one of the things that I also kind of saw there. But to your point of the black churches versus the white suburban churches, there are, because even my own home church in Atlanta, they stayed online for a long time. And pre-pandemic, the church was just thriving. And I'm sure Pastor Barnett, he's a realist. He don't mind me sharing, but
I've been there. I remember.
It was thriving. But even now, 5 years later, there is like such a it's kind of like you're really struggling to try to pull this heavy boulder up a hill.
Well, you reclaim your identity.
You do.
You're working to reclaim your identity.
Yeah. And but our church wasn't alone. We weren't the only one that was like that. And I think that is going to be something that the research will be interested. I'll be interested to see the research even in the next 5 years of the state of particularly the black
Let's
church.
talk about this from a leadership perspective, Jeff, because I don't want us to miss that before we wrap up this episode. I think from a leadership perspective, there's some lessons that almost were like put on a neon sign for you and for me.
Yeah.
As we went through it and came out of it.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what your big takeaways are. It's like, okay, here's what I've learned 5 years later.
Yeah. Well, I learned, and I'll start with the statement I made that you had shared with our organization. That idea of that statement, just, and I don't know, how long you've been praying about it, where it hit, but that statement of self-preservation will never change the world, really just was the starting point for me of what I learned as a leader is that regardless of the ambiguity, the uncertainty of what's going on, is that we still serve a God who's large and in charge, who is sovereign and in total control. Yeah. And that before we trust, obviously we submit to our government, we submit to our leadership, but at the end of the day, man, we're submitting to the authority of our Heavenly Father. Yeah. And so I think for me, learning to, we talk about blind trust, or blind faith, but learning to really have that faith that said, hey man, no matter what's going on, I'm still going to pursue the things of the gospel. I'm still going to, do everything I can to share my faith without fear, love on God's people, lead with a sense of grace and respect and love. And so no matter what's going on around, because there was even within that, because of all that was going on and everybody was glued to computer screens, we saw a lot of things happen, especially when it comes to social justice issues,
which I thought was one of the oddest things.
Yeah.
Like you had the Black Lives Matter, which is the biggest one, happen during the pandemic.
Yes.
So you had people gathering and marching and then it spun out of control.
Absolutely, yeah.
It became this thing where you and I were like, hey, the organization, no, man, that thing's evil. But there's a cry here that needs to be recognized. Yeah. And so, Black Lives Matter. And then you watched it, and it I know you felt this way. Yeah. It just kind of spun out of control.
It did.
Everything got lit on fire, and it became this looting thing. It became... And it just, and then you go, there's nothing to do with the pandemic anywhere in this. Yeah. And so it is a funny thing to me. I don't mean funny, ha ha. I mean funny, odd. Yeah. That somehow the pandemic gave rise to this thing called the Black Lives Matter movement. It's almost, and I don't know if it's the more insulated we became. Yeah. It just heightened everything people already felt. Yeah. Maybe that was what kind of gave rise to the spillover to the streets. I don't know, but it was fascinating that was happening at the same time the pandemic was happening.
Yeah. And I think to that, and I won't chase a rabbit trail on this, I think what was interesting is that the organization had been around several years before, but just got very grassroots.
It was a blip on a map.
Yeah. But because now everyone is so glued to their computers, their phones, their iPads, and now you got visual images of things like Ahmaud Arbery is taking place. George Floyd. That's these visual images. Now you got so many people who are singular focused and glued to this image, and
it got channeled.
And I'm going to say something that would probably be, controversial, I guess. I don't know, but I feel like it gave the organization, which I've been very outspoken about as far as the things that I disagree vehemently with the way the organization did, but I think it gave them now a platform to build off of.
Let me say it another way. It gave them a platform to raise money.
Yes, it did. It gave a platform. It did. It gave that platform, and And if I could go back, not that I was,
should people have become millionaires off the death of those two people?
Absolutely not.
See, that's where I had the problem with
the whole thing. Absolutely not. I think, and that's the problem too, because everybody was uber focused, which praise God for that. Praise God that people were hurting and lamenting and grieving and saying, hey man, I want to be unified. I want to have solidarity around this idea that, man, all lives matter, excluding Black lives. But I struggle when seeing an organization capitalize off of something that is a greater issue, and so I think that was, I was a little rabbit trail. Sorry about that, but when you start talking about it, but I think so as a leader, I'll just leave that right there. That's another podcast because I got many of thoughts on how that. But I think so. I think that was one of the things I learned, and then too, I think that we talk about the importance of flexibility and the ability to pivot became the primary focus as a leader. Being a leader who can be very flexible and be able to pivot on the dime. We had to put together 4 youth pastor summits in a matter of 2 weeks, all virtually. They were all live events, and we had to put them together, in 2 weeks in time to still have that. So I thought, the ability to, as a leader, we should always lean into the ability to be flexible and to pivot appropriately and not to stay true to where we are. And I think the other thing, Brent, that I learned is that, and again, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit, is that no, it's good. I think that I learned that we definitely need to be more grace-filled as followers of Jesus and to extend grace to others. And I learned that there is the power of communication is just that. It's powerful. And because when we don't communicate, we don't give each other grace. We leave ourselves to our own assumptions, and then that perpetuates divisiveness. That is there. And so then what happens is we spend our lives chasing ghosts and shadows and instead of being unified around the things of the gospel, because that's what was happening. Everybody, I think, because we've seen the spirit of tribalism really kind of emerge out of that pandemic, and I just felt like we lost our ability, appetite, and desire to be grace-filled followers of Jesus. So that's for me. What about for you? What did you?
Well, I mean, the first one that comes to mind as I reflect back 5 years later from the pandemic is the illusion of control.
Illusion. Okay, unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, there's no. We ultimately live in a broken world. No, I had no control over a virus that. Hopefully, this isn't controversial anymore. Was created in the Wuhan lab in China.
Yeah.
If not, then maybe something else happened but you had this thing that did come into existence.
Yeah.
Everybody agrees with that part.
Yeah.
Everything seems to point to the fact that it was a lab virus that got leaked. And I have no control over that.
Right.
I have no control over the fact that a friend of mine would get it and pass away, go to heaven.
Yeah.
I have no control. I mean, I have no control over the fact that all these schools are going to shut down and our ministry is going to. So, I have the illusion of control is that somehow I can determine the outcome. I have no ability to determine the outcome of the culture around me.
Yeah.
I do have the opportunity to respond to the culture around me. I do. While I don't have, I had to learn to give up the illusion of control, but I can always live and in a calculated, gospel-centered response to what is happening. So there is an illusion of control, and of course that pushes you to the sovereignty of God as well. Ultimately, I'm not grumpy today.
Yeah.
Before I say anything else.
I love the disclaimer.
I'm not grumpy today, but I just want to be plain. I was very frank about it. I think if you were lazy going into the pandemic, you were lazier coming out of the pandemic.
Oh, most definitely. That's not being grumpy. That's facts.
I think if you were overweight going into the pandemic, you were just obese coming out. Like I just think you were if you, whatever your weaknesses were got accentuated. Sorry, I'm not grumpy.
I'm laughing at Brian.
if you
sorry, man. I'm sorry. It's just, I didn't know what you were gonna say. I was like, yeah. If you were lazy, but
but it's true. If you were prone to conspiracy theory going into the pandemic, you were full blown 10 metal foil hat coming out. If you were like whatever your weaknesses were, got accentuated. And I think whatever your strengths were also got. If you were committed to your health, boy, you were healthier probably on the other side of the pandemic. Like you were, if you survived it, obviously you came out with some healthier habits. With some deeper commitments to sleep and to diet and to exercise and to community and to different things. So I think that the pandemic spotlighted our strengths and weaknesses and then gave us like this laboratory to see whether or not we're either going to get stronger or weaker through it. I think if you were fearful, you became more fearful. If you were fearful going into the pandemic, you're probably driving down the road with a mask and the windows up right now. You know, like whatever it was, it got accentuated.
That's good. That's fair.
But at the same time, if you're missional, say the flip side of this coin gets really exciting. You figured out. You started to wrestle with a thing you had never wrestled with before, like a phrase called digital ecclesiology. You started going, okay, what can I do to shepherd, to foster, to advance, to disciple, to grow? Like if you were creative going in, you got more creative coming out. If you were courageous going in, you got more courageous going out. So you either got weaker or you got stronger based on who you were when you looked in the mirror and how you responded as we went through this pandemic. Now, I've already said there was a clear moment of ambiguity where we had no idea what was coming at us because we had so many different mixed messages, and we shouldn't judge each other too harshly. We should give a lot of grace to that. But there is also a time where you go, okay, the dust may not have settled from this pandemic, but I got my feet under me. Right? And I'm not going to just sit here and dwindle and atrophy. So you either, that's the thing. I had knee surgery several times in my life, but I've had, I remember I had 2 ACL reconstructions. And the first one I had to be still I was younger and the technology came a long way. So the second one, I recovered much faster, but the first one I had to be still for a while.
Wow, okay.
And I remember looking at my leg and being one leg was bigger than the other leg because one leg was atrophying. Because the muscles weren't being used. And it was pretty obvious when we came out of the pandemic, those who had atrophied mentally, those whose emotions had atrophied, those whose muscles had atrophied, whose critical thinking skills had atrophied, those whose creativity had atrophied. And then it was pretty obvious those who had grown stronger. Right? And it's a basic principle. If you don't use it, you lose it. And so, I think that was what I learned going through the pandemic is whatever you choose to be will either get heightened or will get heightened one way or another through this pandemic. I also wrote down that whatever your goals were in the pandemic became your outlook after the pandemic. Here's what I mean by that.
Okay.
If your goal was, and I'm not bragging and I'm not saying we did it all right, but our goal was, when this thing happened, I sat down with our team and I went, all right, this half of our team, you go with Jeff. We're not doing one YPS. We're doing all 4. And we're going to pay every communicator that signed up to come because they're going to hurt through this too. And we're going to serve every youth pastor that's signed up to come. And they're not going to have to pay much. I think it was like a $5 thing or something just to cover the registrations. We and
other people weren't doing that.
Nobody was doing that. Right? And we're going to serve and serve well. The rest of you, come with me, and if you thought you just dodged a bullet, you didn't. Right? And we're going over here. And we're not canceling the summer. You get the fun tax now of coming with me and figuring out how to do the summer. And we're going to create an entirely new model of doing ministry in the next 6 weeks.
Yep. I remember.
Nobody gets a day off.
That is true.
There's no downtime.
Yeah.
Everybody's at home working 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
You're going to work 14 hours a day, and we're going to lean in.
Yeah.
Right? And what happened out of that was we created new sessions. Mm-hmm. We created new ways of serving.
Yep.
We created an entirely new audience.
Yep.
We created new donor base.
Yeah.
People looked at that and went, I want to contribute to people who didn't circle the wagons. They didn't circle the wagons.
Yeah.
And so our goals during the pandemic, we are going to still pursue and serve. Our mission hasn't changed.
That's good.
We've just got to figure out how to do it differently. Became our outlook, our standards.
Yeah.
Goals can determine standards, can be the prerequisite for new standards.
Yeah.
Our goals in the pandemic created new standards of excellence, a new outlook for us after the pandemic.
That's good, man.
And so, we give up the illusion of control. Whatever, either if you're weak, you get weaker. If you're strong, you get stronger. And then whatever those goals are during the pandemic kind of become your outlook after. And then the last thing I would say, and again, I'm not being grumpy today, I promise you. But the last thing I would say about this pandemic is and I'm just going to say it this way, and I'm not liberal, so don't call me a liberal. I'm so tired of people going, just if you break with the ultra-conservative, just a little bit, you're a liberal. I'm not a liberal, but
I'm sorry, hold on, I'm sorry. Before you say, this is another thing that has changed in the last 5 years.
Oh,
we
no,
have to
it
give
is.
more disclaimers.
Oh, more disclaimers.
We have to give more disclaimers.
And if somebody hears this and goes, why would you give a disclaimer? You're probably right. I shouldn't have.
But we live in
I'm scarred.
Yeah.
I've got people have flown in and confronted me on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
I've had people take shots.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
We've been called out.
Yes, we have.
The thing, just over stuff that I could never have predicted either.
Right. Sorry,
so
but
you're just seeing that was a little shell shock.
No. This is this is COVID 5 years later.
But I shouldn't have the shell shock. But anyways, here's the thing. No matter where you are now, if you're a Christian and you want to take a shot at somebody who wears a mask and you think better of yourself because you don't, or if you're on the other side of that and here you are 5 years later going, man, I'm on my 8th vaccine. And I can't believe that somebody else isn't getting the medicine that I'm taking, and I feel better about myself. I would argue both of those perspectives are the same sin, and that's pride. Because whenever you feel better about yourself because of somebody else's weakness or perceived weakness, you are being prideful. Right?
Yeah.
Like we should be, if the pandemic should have taught us to be more grace-filled, Jeff, then for God's sake, why don't we be grace-filled and kind now?
That's good, man.
Be the most patient version of ourselves now.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, does it seem crazy to me that you'd wear a mask inside of a locked car with the windows up driving down the road and nobody around? Yeah, that seems a little odd to me.
Yeah.
But if I look if I drive past that person and I go, oh man, they're crazy and I'm so much, look how good I am. Yeah. That's prideful.
Yeah, you're right.
If anything, this should, this dramatic thing like the pandemic should eradicate, or at least try to be doing surgery on that pride in our lives. We can't fully eradicate it. It's always going to be there, and we got to fight it for the rest of our lives till we go to heaven. But there's a sanctification that should be happening in which pride is getting kicked to the curb over and over and over again because of what I've been through. Not that I should become more prideful.
Yeah, man.
But that I should become more patient.
That's good.
And that's a little bit of a soapbox on that last one.
No, that's good.
But I do. I think there's a lot that can be learned. I think there's a lot we should learn. And God forgive us if we make some mistakes that we made last time, if this ever happens again. Yeah, man. So good. No, I think what a great way to put a pin there, Brent. I think it's so good and so spot on. And here's the thing, if we don't learn from
learn from the things that we've experienced in the past, then we will definitely repeat them in a worse way in the future.
Yeah.
And so, I think as we can reflect on these last 5 years coming out of the pandemic, I think we're all would acknowledge we're different.
Yeah.
But we get the opportunity from this day forward to continue to tell a better story with our life.
Tell a better story.
And I think
be different. Don't be jaded.
Yeah, don't be. Yes.
Be kind.
Yeah.
Patient and grace-filled.
And stop atting us on social media. It's when we say something that is really not what you think we're saying. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, we could continue on with this conversation, but we're going to put a pin right here because I'm excited about our next conversation that we're going to have. And as always, thank you so much for hanging out with us at our Chasing Elephants podcast. And bro, it's good to have my brother back.
Good to sit back across from you.
Have him in the building, in the spot. And so until next time, my friends, God bless you, and we'll see you.
See you next time.